Hi YouTube, welcome back to another video from Wtf Rc Cars. So we're going to carry on building the XB8e22, and this time we've got the side plates to mount, or the chassis guards. We've got the centre diff and motor assembly to mount. We're going to be mounting the 2200 kV hobby wing motor. This is the 4668 G3 censored motor. So let's crack on with it. Right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is get 8 of these little tiny things, little tiny dome headed screws. So start by getting the rear one into position. Should just be able to work his way along. And they do these as a carbon fibre upgrade, I think. I'm not sure if it's Xray that does them, but I have seen the carbon fibre ones of these advertised. I'm not really sure if there's any advantage to it, whether it'd offer any more strength to it. But I'd certainly expect carbon to be a bit less forgiving if you have a bad side impact. You're probably going to shatter it. Right, so that's all the side rails down. Right, so we're going to want the motor mount, and then you want that side of the diff mount in place. We're going to want the plastic half, and we're going to want to get that lined up. Then you want your second half of the diff housing, and that should sit in place nicely. Then you're going to want to get the carbon top plate. We are going to want a little bit of thread lock. So I'll just run through quickly and put thread lock on these screws ready. So you're going to want to get 2 screws with thread lock on into the aluminium motor plate. Then you've got 2 tapered headed screws. These can go into this back plate. Then you want the 2 longer screws. Now these drop all the way through the bracket. And then I like to just make sure these are all tightened down by hand. Alright, then you're going to want to flip over the RC. And we're going to line this up. So you want a little bit of thread lock on the 2 screws that are going through into the front aluminium part. And then you've got 2 screws to go into the rear plastic. And these obviously don't need thread lock. And then we're going to tighten these down with the 2.5mm driver. And then I just like to finish off hand tightening these just to make sure, find you far less likely to strip threads out that way. Right, once we've got all that in place, you know, you get your motor, see whereabouts this lines up, and then choose what size screws you're going to be using. And again, I've dropped a little bit of thread locking on these. Now, I usually find with the race RCs, you tend to try and choose where you put it motor, and I always end up taking it back off and moving it because I don't like where the wires lie. So let's see how we're going to line this pinion up. Now them wires don't look too bad going that way, and it looks like with this pinion at least I'm just going to be able to tighten it all the way down to the end of the output shaft, and that'll have us lined up perfect. So I'm going to put a bit of thread lock on his pinion, so at least we stand a fighting chance for it not flying off first race. Right, then we're going to get this into place. And it looks like that lines up pretty good with centre of the actual pinion. So now we're going to need to get 2 of the remaining screws and a washer on each one. So we're going to want to drop these in. And these are 2.5mm heads. Right, so let's have a look what we got. In the absence of a tiny bit of paper kicking about, I do however have a plastic bag. So let's get that in, and I'll always be adjusting the gear mesh later on, so it's just to get it somewhere near. Yeah, that works pretty well. There's very little movement in them. So if you don't have paper to do your gear mesh in, a little plastic bag will do. So what we should have is 2 screws remaining, and they're the alternative 3M screws or M3s for the motor. So we've got a side plates, a centre diff and our motor all installed. So we are now moving on to, looks like bag 10.1, 10.2. Right, so in this one we're going to be fitting the Ludicrous L8949. So I'm going to give this one a try. They're not really that big of wheels on the 1/8 truggy, so should do. I think it's about 23 kg at 8.4 volt, I think. Yeah, 23 kilogram, 8.4 volt, and 0.052. So, and it looks quite nice against the Hobbywing motor. So, first thing we're going to have to make up is we're going to have to make our little steering links. So we're going to want 2 of the little end ones, and then we're going to want our tiny little steering tie. And I must admit, the turnbuckle wrenches or spanners, they really are a godsend when you're working on these tiny little things. Just so much easier to hold it. And this one we need 7mm. So that's a 7mm gap. Then we've got 2 little olives to fit, 1 on either side. So that should be his little steering tie rod. Right, servo horn wise, we're going to need a 25 on this one, so that is F, which is this one, and I'll be setting all steering and everything up, and I'll be ordering an aluminium one because don't have much faith in these lasting 2 minutes. The one on the XT8e lasted 1 or 2 laps, I believe it was. So for the servo horn, it's advising to use one that comes with your servo. Luckily the Ludicrous servos do come with them. So we want a servo, then we need our servo mount. It looks like this mounts that way. So we're going to need us two little mounts to screw into. Then we're going to need 4 of the servo mount screws and washers. And I usually leave completely tightening these down until it's fully built up, because sometimes it's a little bit awkward positioning the servos exactly where they need to be until you have everything in place. So that's got the 2 little brackets installed. Now we've got the servo mount posts, or servo post mounts, and it doesn't say thread lock these. Now this, if I remember rightly, on the XT8e I had the same weird thing as this, where it shows you to put the flats for the posts down towards the bottom, but the holes in the top are actually a lot smaller for the screws that go to your servo tray, so you end up having to have the slots at the top. And I'm pretty sure that was the same on the XT, on the Truggy variant. Because it physically will not screw in to the other end. It's got bigger holes for the screws that come through the chassis. And again, it doesn't say thread lock the chassis side either. So let's get this one flipped over, and I believe you're going to want to take your servo cable backwards so it doesn't get caught. So it looks like it lines up pretty good. Right, so that's got everything in place from the bottom. Now we need to mount the steering. So we need to mount our little steering bar. Right, so it looks like that's how it's going to be positioned. So we're going to want a small screw that holds the servo arm on, that ain't going to last 2 minutes because it's plastic. And then we're going to need our nut on the back of this and the bolt all the way through. So if we do that, then flip it over, then we've got to try and drop the locking nut into place, and we should just be able to tighten this up. And that should be our steering mechanism in place. Right, next it's advising us to mount. So it wants us to mount the ESC and the radio tray. Looks like this one we're going for the outermost screws. So it looks like it's going to be these small ones. So if we get one of them into place, and these are 2mm screws or hex heads. So that's got the radio tray mounted down. And I've learnt from building previous ones, never mount your servo cable under the radio tray to keep it out way, because if you want to take your servo out, you've got to remove it all. So, once we've got that in place, it's tiny enough you can fit both the ESC and receiver down to radio tray, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to get the battery tie down bars mounted. So you're going to want to get these screwed down most of the way, and then you're going to have to adjust these for whatever batteries you're fitting. Right, so once you get to this stage, we're not going to use them two little bits, and then we won't need the 4 little screws that hold them in. So we're going to get the nuts that mount the battery trays. And I'm pretty sure the battery trays are completely reversible. So we'll get the nuts dropped into them, and then we've just got to get them into position, which is easier said than done. So that is our battery trays in position. Servo tray, radio tray, motor, pinion, centre diff. So we're all looking good so far, and I think we're going to call it a day at that, because it's going to be a long enough video as it is. And the next thing we're going to be moving on to after this will be the shockers. So let's wrap this one up. Right, so let's wrap this one up. We've got the Hobbywing 22 kV motor all meshed, we've got the centre diff fitted, we've got the Ludicrous servo, which is the L8919. So it's about 23 kilograms, and I quite like the cable on these, black with the grey wire. The ESC I'm going to be running in this one will be the XR8 Pro. I'm going to be running two 2S batteries, so 4S. And receiver wise, I think I will go for one of the FGR4S, like I have done in the rest of the race RCs. So keeps weight down, it's nice and small, and I've not had an issue with any range or anything like that. So next up will be fitting the shocks, or building the shocks then fitting the shocks. So we're getting there with this one. I do want an aluminium servo arm, because I don't think that one's going to last 2 minutes, because the one in the XT8E didn't. But thanks again for watching WTF Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. And I'll catch you guys again in the next one.